Welcome to another Tempo Storm Meta Snapshot breakdown. The recent balance changes have shaken up the meta more than expected, leading to new decks popping up seemingly out of nowhere. One of these decks even made its way into Tier 1 thanks to the new buffs, surprising many players. With the newest mini set on the horizon set to release on the 3rd of June, players are grinding out ladder to gain a solid footing prior to the upcoming meta shift. Let's take one last in-depth look into the meta to help you prepare your rank for all of the changes to come. Before we jump into Tier 1, we wanted to remind you to check out the rest of our meta report over on tempostorm.com for a full analysis on every deck in the tier list. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be kept up to date with all of our Hearthstone content. Now let's dive into Tier 1. Leading off Tier 1 in this meta snapshot breakdown is Libra Paladin. This archetype came back to life following the balance changes, making virtually no one happy. Seriously, at this point, pretty much everyone is tired of this archetype, but sadly, it's pretty versatile. Libra Paladin is by far the best deck that you can take to ladder in order to gain the largest edge possible. The archetype aims to spend the early turns of the game fighting for the board before closing the match out with large value tools, such as Libra of Wisdom and Lady Liedrin. This archetype performs best when playing against some of the more aggressive decks on ladder due to the consistent healing with Libra of Hope, taunts, and early game threats to fight for board. When it comes to bad matchups, Secret Rogue tends to be pretty difficult for the Paladin to deal with. Valeera's secrets can be problematic, leaving you with awkward turns to navigate. On top of this, Blackjack Stunner allows the rogue to clean up your Librams with ease, denying you a large portion of your value. The next deck found within Tier 1 is another Paladin deck, Nzoth Paladin. This archetype sprouted out of nowhere following the buffs to Nzoth, as now the deck can easily transition into the later turns and give you an extra threat. If your opponents manage to make it to turn 9, you can usually lock them out with Nzoth, swinging the game like they've never seen before. This deck does have a core issue though. Due to how many mid to late game threats that the deck has, you'll occasionally find yourself with very heavy hands, struggling to navigate the early turns. Nzoth Paladin tends to find itself performing best against Control Priest because Anduin can't deal with the consistency of your threats. Additionally, cards like Oh My Yogg make their turns exceedingly awkward. Nzoth Paladin tends to struggle against aggressive decks that can take board and never let go, such as Token Druid. You really don't have access to the removal to wipe their board. The last deck that we'll be taking a look at within Tier 1 today is Rush Warrior. Despite the nerfs to some of the deck's best cards, the archetype still finds itself performing well, mostly due to the relevance of Paladin on ladder. Rush Warrior is a versatile deck that can make a lot out of nothing, and it has some hands that feel truly unbeatable, especially when Rokara goes untouched. The late game threats that the deck can easily slot in also gives the deck a lot of late game pressure, making it hard for decks to run it out of value. Rush Warrior performs best against some of the more aggressive Paladin archetypes, with Secret Paladin being the best for Warrior. You can easily clear their boards and slowly build up your own, locking the Paladin out of the game. As for bad matchups, Control Priest tends to be problematic for the Warrior. Anduin has nearly endless removal for the Warrior's threats, and he can continue to heal the chip damage so cards such as Troublemaker won't close out the game. As usual, we will now jump into this Meta Snapshots Tier 2 with a look at the top 3 decks within the tier. Before we jump in, we want to remind you to check out the rest of our tier list over at our website, tempostorm.com. Control Priest leads Tier 2 this time around. This archetype continues to be the favorite of several pro players due to its flexibility and number of required decisions. If you're a fan of longer control games where your input will be substantially more impactful than with other decks, then this iteration of Priest is for you. Control Priest continues to do best against archetypes that aim to burn you out quickly, such as Aggro Hunter. While Rexar spends his turns pushing chip damage and trying to stick a board, you'll simply deny all of his plays with removal and healing. However, Control Priest continues to struggle against some of the decks with constant mid-range threats, such as Nzoth Paladin. While you aim to stabilize, they'll continue to beat you down with beefy minion after beefy minion until you succumb to the pressure. Token Druid follows up Control Priest in Tier 2 as one of the best aggressive decks at the moment. This list capitalizes on other decks' inconsistencies. When opponents think they're fine to pass a few early turns, you'll build a wide board of Gibberlings. If they clear that, you'll have 2/2s that your opponent has to clear, less the little menaces beat your opponent down relentlessly. If they manage to stave off a board, you'll have Solar Eclipse and Arbor up to create one last final stand. All in all, decks that want to chill in the early game will struggle to deal with your boards. For this reason, Token Druid performs best against decks such as Secret Rogue that aim to chill in the early turns and struggle to combat wide boards. But this deck tends to have a difficult time against Control Priest due to how much removal Anduin has in his arsenal. The last deck that we'll be taking a look at in today's Meta Snapshot breakdown is Miracle Rogue. Much like Control Priest, this archetype is one of the most versatile decks in the meta, requiring the highest level of skill to pilot optimally. Miracle Rogue players need an in-depth knowledge of how to pilot different matchups, when they need to greed their cycle, or if they need to just pray and ship it early. Much like Token Druid, Miracle Rogue is an archetype that does very well against Secret Rogue, partly due to Miracle just being the more well-rounded rogue deck. As for bad matchups, Miracle Rogue players hate to queue into Rush Warrior, as it can be hard to remove Garish's constant threats, like Rokara, letting the warrior snowball very easily. And that wraps up this Meta Snapshot breakdown. The meta is still stabilizing, and for one of the first times in recent patches, we'll be receiving a new set of cards prior to the meta getting fully stale. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. It seriously helps us out a ton, and we appreciate all of your support. We'll see you back here a little bit after the release of the new mini set, but until then, we wish you the best of luck on ladder. See you next time!